Hi everyone, I'm Christine and welcome back to my sewing studio. Today we'll be doing a sew with me. It is the Burda dress number 6418 in the A style. It's the longer dress here. I actually didn't think I'd be able to make the long dress because I did not think I'd have enough fabric, but it turns out I do. I've got this really pretty coral cotton, 100% cotton fabric that I've had for a long time. We'll be using that. Also make sure you've got your thread. You'll need to have a tape measure to lay out your pattern pieces. It does call for a 24-inch zipper. I've only got a 12-inch zipper, so hopefully that'll work. If not, I'll be having to redo that. And make sure you've got your scissors. I've got this really great pair of scissors, but I've also got a rotary cutter that I will be using. These are really long pieces of fabric, and since it's not too detailed in the long part, I'm going to be using my rotary cutter for that. I think that's about it. So today's dress, I will be making a size 16. I have found that if you go up 2 sizes from what you normally wear in stores, it works out the best. I normally wear a size 12, so I'm going up to a size 16. I haven't made this dress yet, so I'm not for sure how well it's going to fit in the size 16. So throughout these steps, I will talk about what you might want to do to try it on, test the size, make sure it fits well. The suggested fabrics for this are cotton, linen, and blends, and you can find all of those in this area right here. The Burda pattern is a little different than what I'm normally used to. I normally use Simplicity, Butterick, or McCall's, and they've got all of the information in a different location. Once you get used to it though, you can find it pretty easily. I am using a 100% cotton. It is not as stretchy. Actually, it's not stretchy at all, but I really like working with cotton. It just is a little easier for me. Plus, there are so many different options at JoAnns, and when there are sales on cotton, I can't resist. So today I will be using a 100% cotton. The notions for this is a 24-inch zipper, like I said, and again, I only have a 12-inch. I'm hoping I will still be able to take this on and off with just a 12-inch zipper. It also calls for interfacing. Something I found I don't like about Burda is that it does not tell you how many yards of interfacing you're going to need. After cutting out the pattern pieces, I did find you need interfacing for pieces 5, 6, 8, and 9, but it doesn't tell you how many yards that actually is. That is tough when you're at the cutting counter. You can't actually pull this open to find out how many yards of interfacing you need. I'm hoping I have enough. Another thing I found that is different with Burda, normally the pattern pieces are shown on here as to how to lay it out on your fabric. Now, sometimes I'll take a look at it and sometimes I kind of figure it out myself. They didn't have that on here. What I realized is it is actually in the pattern pieces itself. So this is now the layout. You can't see it on there, of course, but the layout of the pattern pieces are on the pattern piece. For dress style A, you do need to cut out pieces 1 through 9. I have folded my fabric in half, right sides together, and I laid out pattern piece 1, 4, and 2. Pattern piece 1 is cut on the fold, and pattern piece 4 and 2 you need to lay out based on the distance from the grain line to the edge of the fabric. So you're going to take your tape measure and you're going to measure from each of those grain lines to the edge of your fabric and make sure it's the same distance all the way down the pattern. Okay, I've cut out pieces 1, 2, and 4. Now I've gone through these and there are actually no darts on these pieces. They only have little dots of where to mark, which I'm guessing is what they're using for darts, which is kind of interesting. On pattern piece number 1, there is the bust dart here. You want to make sure you mark that because we will be folding that in right before step number 1. Now, if you needed to lengthen or shorten this, there are a couple lines here on the pattern. I'm not sure if you could see that very well. 2 horizontal lines. And if you ever need to shorten or lengthen a pattern, that's where they recommend you cutting it. So then you can either spread it farther apart or overlap it. An easy way to mark the dots on your pattern piece is to take a pin and stick it through the dot, and then you can take your marker and you can just write on it right next to where your pin is. Pull it out and then you can see where it's at if your marker worked. Okay, I have the remaining pieces all laid out now. I've got piece number 3, which I made sure I measured the distance from the grain line to the edge of the fabric to make sure it lays out straight. One tip, I would recommend starting in the middle of the grain line or the middle of the pattern piece and then working your way out. If you start here and you think it's a great distance, sometimes you'll get to the bottom and the piece will be off of the fabric. I also have all the facings laid out. I've got the neck facing and the armhole facings. Now each of these have grain lines on them as well, but it's not always as important because those facings will be turned inside. And of course, Bella needs to test out the fabric. I forgot to point out that piece number 5 is also cut on the fold. This is the center front facing. One other thing, since we have a lot of pieces in this pattern, make sure you write the number of each piece on your fabric using either a fabric marker or a piece of chalk. Okay, so I have cut out all of my pattern pieces. I also cut out the inner facing for pieces 5, 6, 8, and 9, and I have ironed them onto the fabric. So as you can see, this is piece 9. I've got the inner facing ironed on to the fabric. According to the instructions, it calls to pin the bust dart now. I will go ahead and walk you through that. Of course, there are no pictures of this, but I can show you how to do it. So as you can see, this is my bust dart on pattern piece number 1. This is the wrong side of the fabric. You can see my 2 lines right here. I made a little mark here accidentally, but it's actually these 2 lines. What you're going to do is fold the dart so that the lines match up like that. You're going to take your pin and pin through the lines. So you've got this, if you can see that. I've basically folded it in half to where both of the lines match up, and I've pinned it almost right along the line. What I'm going to do now is on this inside here, I'm going to sew from this edge, the rough edge, to the center of the dart. I just sewed my dart right along the edge here. So when I open it up, now you've got this dart. And what you want to do is iron that down. Okay, so I've pinned up piece number 1 to my mannequin so that you can see the darts. You've got the 2 bust seam darts right here. Now step number 1 is taking piece number 2, which is the side fronts, sewing them to the front, and then doing the same on the back piece, which we'll walk through now. We've got pattern piece number 1, and we are pinning number 2, which is the side front, to either side of number 1. I've pinned them down the sides here. This is the armhole for number 2, so that when it opens up, you see you've got your armhole on this side. Make sure you've got right side to right side together, and also make sure you stop down here where you made the mark. You made the mark on the piece number 1. This is where your slit is in your dress. So what I do, I normally stick a pin right here because knowing myself, I will just keep going. What I would recommend when you are sewing these side seams is to use a based stitch. A based stitch is a little bit longer, and that way you can try your dress on after you sew all the sides together. If it fits well, then you can sew it using a standard stitch. If it doesn't fit well, you can easily pull out the base stitch and either use a smaller seam allowance or tighten it if you need to. So I finished sewing my side pieces to my front piece. I used a base stitch, so if I need to take it out or tighten it, I can. Since I did baste it, I am not ironing it yet. The second part of step 1 is to take your center back, which is piece number 3, and pin it to piece number 4, which is your side back. Now they don't show any pictures of this in the pattern, but it talks about doing the same as step 1. So make sure when you've got your piece number 4 pinned that you've got the armholes in the center. Make sure you've got right side to right side, and so that when you turn this out, you've basically got a full armhole. Now you're going to sew the sides, and again I recommend using a base stitch. Okay, I finished step 1. I sewed the back side pieces to the center back piece number 3. The next step is the zipper. In step 4, we are now going to sew on our zipper. Now what I have done for my center back, I have actually serged the edges on my pattern piece number 3. It's the only edges I've serged so far, but I did do that because we will be putting the zipper along there. Okay, so we're going to put the zipper on. Now what you'll want to do is take your zipper. I've got my 2 pieces, my 2 number 3 pieces, right sides together. This is the seam where the zipper will be placed. You're going to take your zipper and put the edge of the zipper along the top edge of your dress. Then lay it out, and what you'll want to do is take your fabric marker and mark where the zipper stop is on your fabric. And then you'll want to do it on the other side as well. So now you've got exactly where your zipper is going to be laid out. What we're going to do now is we're going to baste using a base stitch. We're going to baste along the edge here up to the mark, and then you're going to switch over to a regular stitch and stitch the rest. However, for me, since I am using a smaller zipper, I am not for sure how this is going to work with this dress, so I am going to keep basting the rest of my dress, just in case I have to fix the zipper. Okay, I have sewn both pieces of my number 3 together. I basted up until the zipper mark, the unstop of the zipper, and then you should have done a regular stitch all the way down. I basted because again, I don't know how long, how this zipper is going to work. So after you sewed it, you're going to want to open up the seam allowance and iron it down, because then you're going to take your zipper, you're going to open it up and flip it over. So it's upside down. You're going to take the left side and lay it along your seam here, right along the seam. You don't want it too far on the inside because you don't want to be able to see it after you take the basting stitch out. You're going to lay it along the seam, and then you're going to use your zipper foot and sew it right down the center here. You can pin it if you want, but a lot of times I think it gets bunched up too much if you do pin it down. If you are a little nervous about it, then go ahead and baste it, because again, you can take that off easily. I have sewn one side of my zipper on. I did baste it, first because I may have to take the zipper out, but second, I usually baste my zipper on to begin with because I swear it never fails. I always have to do something with the zipper. So I ran the stitch down the side here, and then what I forgot to tell you, when you get down to the bottom right below the stop, put your needle in and then pivot around and sew this little part right here, right across the zipper. Okay, so now you're going to want to zip up your zipper and now do the same thing on the other side. You really probably don't need to pin it because it is already stitched on one side. Go ahead and switch your zipper foot over to the other side and run a stitch right down the center. Okay, I've got both sides of my zipper sewn in. Now you're going to flip it over and use your seam ripper to carefully rip out your basting stitch in there. For the next step, you're going to take both pieces, put them together, right sides together, and pin them along the shoulder seams. Then you're going to want to stitch right along the shoulder seams. Now that we've got our shoulder seams sewn together, what I'd recommend you doing is actually trying this on. I know that the sides aren't done yet, but it will give you an idea about the fit. I did try this on and it fits pretty well, so I am going to go ahead and sew these 4 seams in a normal stitch, serge them, and iron them. So our next few steps are going to have to do with the facing. It'll be the neck facing and the armhole facing. The first step is you're going to take piece number 5, which is the one that was cut on the fold. You're going to take piece number 5 and you're going to attach piece number 6 to it at the shoulder seams. Now normally there are darts on here to tell you which side goes where, but this one doesn't have any. So make sure when you open it all up, your pieces almost touch. If you have the 6s flipped, then it'll be almost like a U. So make sure you've got your 6s down, pinned correctly, so that it looks like that when it's pinned, and then sew along these seam edges. Once you've sewn along your shoulder seams, what you'll want to do is take both of your seam allowances and iron them out so that they're flat like this. I went ahead and serged the edges, but you don't have to. Now something else they don't have in the instructions, and what you normally do is you take your facing and the inside of the circle is what gets pinned to the neckline of your dress. And so you usually want to finish out this outside part of the circle. It's going to be inside your dress, but it's still nice to have it finished. So a lot of times they recommend just folding in 1/4 of an inch. It's a little more than 1/4 of an inch, but folding it in and ironing it, and it'll stay usually, or even stitching it. What I usually do is take the serger and I serge the outside of the circle, but it's up to you. So the next step is where you are going to pin your neck facing to your dress. You are going to take your neck facing, right sides together, and you're going to match it up along the shoulder seams. Shoulder seam to shoulder seam. Then you kind of just lay it out. It actually is a lot easier to lay it down on a table and pin this. I did that, I laid it on my table, but I wanted to put it up here to show you. So you lay it out and you pin it all the way around, as you can see here, and then you're going to sew it along the edge. Okay, so I've got my neck facing sewn along the neck edge. The next step says to baste along the inside, but it's not very clear. What you have to do, you fold this facing to the inside of the dress like that. Funny story, the first shirt I made with interfacing, I didn't understand the step, and my shirt ended up having interfacing on the outside. It was a confusing step. So as far as basting of your neck facing, you could easily baste it by hand along the shoulder seams here, and then of course on the back part here. That should be enough to hold your facing down. If you find that it keeps flopping up when you're wearing it, try ironing it again really well, and hopefully that'll help. So one of the markings I forgot to make when I was cutting out the pattern pieces were the markings for where the pockets go. This is piece number 2 and piece number 4. I'm pinning back up onto the dress form, and there are 2 little lines, and it does actually say pocket opening. I just completely missed that. So go ahead and make those markings on your fabric so we know where those pockets go. Now you're going to pin your pockets to your dress. You're going to take one set of pockets with right side to right side, and you're going to pin them along the side of your dress, matching up where the lines are. The pocket will go a little over each of those lines, and I put a pin across where I want to stop stitching, because what you're going to do is stitch in between those 2 lines on either side. And then you're going to do the same for the other side of pockets.